I'm Matthew Corley. I'm from the Console Domination Gaming Network. Today we have a very special interview. I have my co-host, Gavin. Hello, Gavin.
Hey, Matt. G'day, Matt. How are you going?
Very well, thanks. So we have a very special guest, as you can see with us today. It's Mr. Ron Gilbert. Ron was founder and creator of many of our classic games, such as Maniac Mansion, Monkey Island, just to name a few. So Ron, thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely, it's fantastic having you. So just to get the first question out, and this is a question that's always been sort of always on my mind. With Monkey Island, what's the connotation? Is there a connotation between Monkey Island and Pirates of the Caribbean? Did they use any part of the game for the movie at all?
Well, I don't know if they used any part of the game for the movie. I mean, a lot of people say they did. There's certainly scenes in the movie which people say, oh, that's exactly from the game, but it's hard for me to tell because, in a way, I ripped off the game from the ride, right? The ride was something I really, really liked a lot, and I wanted to capture the feel of the Pirates of the Caribbean ride in the game. So, did they rip off the game, or did they just rip off the game that was ripping off the ride? It's really hard to say. So, who knows? It's
a tricky one. I mean, obviously you watch the film, and there's a lot of connotations between both the game and the movie itself. So I've always wondered that, So in terms of your illustrious career with Lucasfilm and LucasArts games, and then moving on from that as well, I mean, you did a lot of work with Ted Schafer, who we were lucky to meet as well at Game Masters a couple of years ago. How was it working with Ted?
It was great. We had a lot of fun working on Monkey Island. He and Dave Grossman and Steve Purcell were just an amazing group of people to work with. Everybody was so funny and fun, and it was a great project to work on with them.
Absolutely, and I mean, obviously with your success with the Cave as well. Tell us a bit more about that. I mean, what sort of gave you the inspiration to create such a unique game?
Well, the idea for the Cave is really old. As a matter of fact, the idea for the Cave predates Maniac Mansion. It was just this idea I had about these three, they were kind of Indiana Jones ripoffs, right? There were these three characters that went exploring this sentient talking cave. And I really, I messed around with the idea, over the span of, probably 25 years, just occasionally dabbling in the idea and talking about it, and then it just kind of seemed that it was like a good time to make it. And Tim and I were sitting around just talking once about games, and I just started talking about the Cave. I just kind of mentioned the whole thing and talking about it, and he was like, well, you should come to Double Fine and make that game. So I did. That's kind of the history of how that happened.
Fantastic. It's pretty good. I'm going to pass the mic over to my...
No worries. With the Cave, when it came out, there was very mixed reviews. I just want to know, because it was such a labour of love and an idea that you had so long ago, how does that make you feel? When you see some negative press about it?
A lot of that stuff to me it's very much in whether you believe in your idea or not. And the Cave is a game that I totally believe in. It's I will just completely stand on that game. And so it doesn't, at some level, it doesn't matter to me what people think, because I built the thing I wanted to build, and I did it the way I wanted to do it, and I'm completely happy with that. I think the place that bad reviews can sometimes hurt you is if you were compromising a little bit, and then the bad reviews kind of call out the places you were compromising, and then that can make me feel bad. But if I believe in what I'm doing, if you believe in what you're doing, that kind of critical criticism, it doesn't matter at some level.
Well, I actually really enjoyed it, and I gave it quite a positive review. I just get your humour, and I've played obviously all the old titles. With the move from point and click, is that something you've always wanted to do? Would you ever look at going back and doing a story-based, like the old games?
Yeah, I think that would be fun to do. I stopped doing them. I mean, I did them for kids at Humongous Entertainment for a lot. But, kind of at its core, the Cave was an adventure game, certainly in structure, but it wasn't a point-and-click game. But I have been looking at a lot of point-and-click stuff. I played, Kentucky Route Zero, which a lot of people call a point and click game. I don't know if it's really a point and click game or not. But the idea of going back and just really doing a classic, hardcore point and click game, that does really interest me. Just from not only from the nostalgia standpoint, but just that I think there was something really neat about those games that maybe other people haven't completely captured in the modern adventure games, and I would like to explore that.
Yeah, it's like with the Telltale series nowadays, they're sort of doing a bit of a hybrid of it. So I definitely, and they're mighty successful. So I think it's something that could be successful. So do you think that now gamers now would get it?
I think they would, because I think the core gameplay of the adventure game is something that people really, really like. So I do think they would get it. You know, I think those games were also really hard because they had to be. You know, gamers expected those games to be hard back then. I do think that, you know, players today do want things that are maybe a little easier and a little bit lighter, which always kind of bugs me. So I think if I were to go back and do another point and click game, I think it would be hard. I think it would be deep and long, and it would be a hard game in that kind of traditional point and click sense. And I don't know how that would go over well.
I like it.
Just one couple of last questions. Where did the idea of Guybrush Threepwood come from? I mean, he's such a unique character, a buckling young guy wanting to be a pirate. You know, where did he come from? Where did inspiration come from?
Well, he was kind of a long journey, you know. I had originally, you know, had the idea for doing a pirate adventure game, and I spent a lot of time, months, just writing these little one-page stories. You know, trying to figure out, okay, well, what's the game about? You know, who's the main character? And I was having a hard time doing that. I had not kind of latched on to who is the main character, why is the main character, you know, in this world. I knew I wanted it to have the feeling of Pirates of the Caribbean. And so I was reading this book. I don't know why I picked it up, called On Stranger Tides. And that book had this main character that was a little bit of a kind of fish out of water character. And I looked at that and I went, you know what, that's what I want the main character of this game to be. And I didn't want him to be a pirate. I wanted him to want to be a pirate, because that does a couple of things. It's interesting from a story standpoint. It's also interesting because it aligns the player with the character, because the player is playing the game and they don't know how to be a pirate, and if the main character in the game also doesn't know how to be a pirate, the two of you can learn at the same time how to be a pirate, which is where, you know, the 3 trials came in. That was just teaching, you know, players, you know, how to be a pirate, as well as teaching Guybrush, you know, how to be a pirate. But he didn't have a name for a long time in development. He was just, we literally called him Guy. He was the guy. He's the guy. Because, you know, I did not have a name from him. And then his name came from Steve Purcell, who was the artist, would save off little concept art of the guy for me to review. And he was working in a program called DPaint. And DPaint, when you saved a little piece of art off, it was called a brush. So he would just name these files, you know, guybrush.lbm. And after a while, I just thought, you know what, I kind of like that name. Let's just call him Guybrush. Everybody thought I was nuts, but that's how he got his name.
You've been known for putting a lot of awesome names into characters. I mean, Zach McGracken, just to name an example, for instance. Again, I mean, obviously that's coming from your humor, your sense of humor, from your team's sense of humor as well. Have you always had that sort of, you know, you always want to have that comedic genius, I suppose, when it comes into games? You always want to have that humor to make people laugh. I mean, was that always the intention?
I don't know if it was always the intention. I think that adventure games lend themselves to comedy because you're asking players to do utterly ridiculous things. And it is one of the things that bothered me about some of the Sierra games, like, you know, Police Quest, because it took itself so seriously, yet I was supposed to do ridiculous things in the game, which you always have to do in adventure games. So I think adventure games are a very good, you know, comedic medium. And I think those two things just line up well. And I don't know that I could do a serious game. I think if I started out doing a serious game, it would just slowly kind of turn into a comedy, or at least be, you know, satirical or a parody of that stuff. I don't know how to do anything else other than that.
Fantastic. Well, look, Ron, you've got one more question? No problems.
Just back to the cave, with the characters, I've got to ask this, like, obviously it is a bit of a darker comedy. They've all got a nasty, self-absorbed sort of... Where'd you get the inspiration from? Is it just that everyone's got this side to them and you wanted to exploit that sort of thing? Like, I actually loved it. I loved the way that, you know, everyone was in it for their own... for themselves. So I just want to know what your inspiration was. Is it just like dark satire, or you know, were you inspired somewhere else for the characters?
Well, I've always been interested in characters that I kind of refer to them as damaged. They have just something really wrong with them at their core. And those characters are a lot more interesting to me, you know, when they're the protagonist, right? Obviously, you know, the antagonist they're always damaged, right? But when you can have a character that's the protagonist of the story that's also damaged, I just think that's kind of interesting. And I in some ways I didn't want them to have any redeeming qualities. I wanted them to kind of be mean, horrible people, and then have the player have to play them through their, you know, mean and horrible stuff that they did, which was really kind of part of understanding, you know, who the characters were.
Yeah, my favourite was the Buddhist monk, because you see the Buddhist monk as being so holy and good and pure, and he was so jaded, and he had his own, you know, own goals, and he was all about himself. It was just, I really enjoyed the game, so I just wanted to let you know. But
Thank you. Yeah, thanks a lot.
And just, I suppose, one last question. What have you got coming up? What can we look forward to as obviously fans of your work?
Well, I'm working on something new. I actually was going to announce it a week ago, and too much stuff just piled up with the trip and trying to get everything, you know, put together. So I kind of delayed the announcement, and maybe in a month I'll be ready to announce it. But
Fantastic. Well, we look forward to it anyway. But look, thank you very, very much for your time. Thanks for joining us at the Classic Console area as well. Feel free to have a look and play some of the old games. We've got the Amiga set up and Commodore 64 set up over there.
I really love how there's actual old CRT monitors. It's not like, you know, fancy LCD flat screens hooked up. It's the old CRT stuff. I love that.
Yeah, you have to really be authentic in this game. Well, look, thanks again, everyone. Thanks for listening and watching, and enjoy. Thank you.
Thanks.